Okay, so now we've made it to the first section of what is debugging. I'm going to go through a couple of these, combine a couple of these sections together because they're not that long. And so we can get through chapter 5 with just maybe with a few videos. So without further ado, let's get ready to hop into the curriculum. But if you are finding this channel and you're not a part of the cohort, you're welcome to follow along with the curriculum. The curriculum is free and it's in the description. The link will be in the description. So follow along with us. So let's get into it. All right, what is debugging? Programming is a complex process. Since it is done by human beings, errors often occur. Programming errors are called bugs, and the process of tracking them down and correcting them is called debugging. Some claim that in 1947, a dead moth caused a problem in one of the first computers. The term bug has remained in use since to refer to any issue that prevents a program from working as intended. National Geographic even has an image of the supposed first bug. Three kinds of errors can occur in a programming language: a syntax error, runtime error, and a logic error. We will first learn about each type of error, and then we will discuss strategies for debugging code and reducing errors. Beginning tips for debugging. Debugging a program requires a different approach compared to writing the original code. As you debug, think of yourself as a detective. Something has gone wrong, and you must use clues, experience, intuition, trial and error, and an inquisitive spirit to solve the problem. Remember what I said earlier, that we are problem solvers. Oftentimes, you will find it tempting to blame errors on JavaScript itself. However, it is far, far more likely that the error is due to an issue with your code. We encourage you to think critically about the code you have written and whether you may have made an error in writing your code. Even senior developers make basic errors on occasion. In this chapter, we will discuss in detail common types of bugs, along with some effective strategies for debugging. You will learn to rely on error messages and console.log for clues and insight. Over time, you will sharpen your debugging skills. We will also discuss how to approach writing code so as to prevent bugs from occurring in the first place. Okay, so now we're introducing you to errors and bugs. Again, these error messages are here to help you. Use them to your advantage. Learn what they are and learn how to investigate your code so that you are able to remedy it. So let's get into the next part. Categories of errors. It is useful to distinguish between categories of errors in order to quickly identify and fix them. Each category manifests itself in a different way, and some strategies may be more useful for certain types of errors. Strategies of JavaScript execution. In order to understand programming errors, it is useful to understand the two stages of code execution. Understand code execution. Parsing. Before code can be run, it must first be parsed or validated and prepared for execution. This is known as the parsing stage, and you can think of it like the pre-flight check for a plane or a spacecraft. A lot of detailed, low-level tasks are carried out during this process, but it is enough for us to understand that parsing verifies the syntax and the structure of the code. So right here, let's take a quick step back and let's remember something about what JavaScript is. JavaScript is an interpreted language, not a compiled language. So the errors that we're going to go over is based on interpreted language. What does that mean? How JavaScript works is that it reads from top to bottom. It goes line by line. So when we see that dreaded syntax error, what it is saying is that as the compiler or as it interprets it and goes through each line, it checks each line to make sure that the syntax is correct. If, again, like I said earlier, you have 10 lines of code, if lines 2 have a syntax error, and what it does is it goes down, it checks line 1. If that's fine, it goes to line 2. If there's a syntax error there, it stops. And it wants you to address it before it goes further. And once you fix it, it goes to line 3, but then you find out you have an error on line 4, and then it stops. That's what interpreted language means. You need to understand it goes line by line. The DOM, the document object model, it goes line by line. So get familiar with that to understand. That's how the error messages are calculated when we hit that syntax error. So let's move forward. So execution. Our code has been parsed. Its syntax has been verified, and the program is ready to run. The execution stage is when the actions written into our program, printing to the console, prompting the user to input, making calculations, etc., are actually carried out. You can think of this stage as a plane taking off. Now, let's talk about the syntax error. JavaScript can only execute a program if the program is syntactically correct. Syntax refers to the structure of a language, spoken programming or otherwise, and the rules about the structure. For example, in English, a sentence must begin with a capital letter and end with the appropriate punctuation. A syntax error is a violation of the formal rules for a given language. Understand what the syntax error is. When you see syntax error, you know that there's something wrong on a particular line. A lot of code editors will let you know where the error is. In VS Code, it'll let you know that the error is coming from line 3, and it is going to let you know where it's actually at. But sometimes the error message, syntax error message, may not make sense because the actual error may not be on line 3. It may be on line 2. So you have to get familiar with what it means. This is why it's so important for you to understand the terminology and understand how it works. Don't memorize syntax. We want you to understand how it works. So if you do run across that syntax error, you can check the rules to find where the problem is. Okay? Now, this sentence contains a syntax error. So does this one. So if you're looking at this, our eyes may not catch it because the way we're reading it, it makes sense, but there is an error in. And so what we're saying in this program language, it may make sense to you, but it's not making sense to the program or to the low-level programming language or JavaScript that is trying to parse your code. For most readers of English, a few syntax errors are not a significant problem. Our brains are often flexible enough to determine the intended meaning of a sentence, even if it occurs one or more syntax errors, or it could contain, one or more syntax errors. Programming languages are not so forgiving. If there is a single syntax error anywhere in your program, JavaScript will display an error message and quit immediately. This is what I was talking about earlier. It goes line by line. Since syntax is validated during the parsing stage, remember parsing stages, syntax errors are the first we see when running a program. During the first few weeks of your programming career, you will probably spend a lot of time tracking down syntax errors. However, as you gain experience, you will make fewer errors and you will find your errors faster. This is why you need to understand how it works as opposed to just memorizing the syntax error. Navigate to the chapter Examples, Directory, and JavaScript Programming Errors and Debugging. Open up the syntax error.js in Visual Studio Code and take a first look at the code. I want you to go through it and I want you to look at this code. You should be able to think like the compiler. For me, I see the error immediately, and so therefore I know how to fix it. But for you, you need to practice it. But now I don't have to go to VS Code. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here and inspect the page, go to the console, and then I am going to clear that, and I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to paste it in and hit enter. It says syntax error. Remember when I said that it's going to give you some type of message? It says missing a closing parenthesis after the list argument. Oh, okay. I see a problem here. There, right there, the console.log is missing the what? The parenthesis. But now something else is wrong as well. But let's first fix that. Now I added it, hit enter. Whoa, I get another one. Now it's saying Wednesday is not defined. Why is it not defined? Because Wednesday is a string and is missing the quotes. That's why it's so important that you learn and you understand to think like the compiler. Now I added the opening and closing quotes. So when the interpreter or compiler goes through and it goes so fast that it's looking for opening, a closing, opening quote, but it doesn't see it, and immediately it stops. And it lets you know Wednesday is not defined. Remember now, when we declare and initialize a variable, we are defining it when we initialize it. So when I just declare a variable, if I just declare day, then that means it hasn't been initialized. There's nothing there to define. But once I initializes it, it becomes defined. So get familiar with that, not defined. That's important. Okay, let's move forward. The second category consists of runtime errors, so-called because they do not appear until you run the program. These errors are also called exceptions because they usually indicate that something exceptional and bad has happened. Get familiar with these two terms, special exceptions. You're going to have to write exceptions when you're trying to debug your programming or to handle errors. We're going to use that term, so understand that term. Runtime errors occur during the execution phase of a program, so we will only encounter them after the syntax of our program is completely correct. So if you're getting runtime error, that means your syntax is correct. So a common runtime error occurs when we try to use a variable that has not been created yet. This can happen if you misspell the name of a variable, as the following example shows. So here we go. Remember, we use camel case, right? So this variable right now has been declared and initialized with a string, and in it is called a sequence of characters is called Jack. Now when we console.log first name, you're going to get a runtime error. There's no syntax error here. It's a runtime error because we are trying to initialize something or trying to run something, console log something that doesn't exist. Now to your naked eye, You may not catch this because it looks so similar, but remember the rules. We use camel case. Everything in JavaScript has to be precise. So therefore, if you name your variable first name with the capital N representing the second word, this has to be capitalized as well. It has to match. So here we get that first reference error, and this is what you're going to see when you get a runtime error. It's reference errors. First name is not defined. You may be racking your brain at first, but you have to remember the rules. We have a standard in JavaScript where we use camel case, but I don't have to use it. I could just use first name with the all lowercase and it won't give me an error. But like I said, we're going to learn about the third error in a moment. But here, first name is not matching what I'm looking for. Remember, this variable is defined and it's a reference to whatever is being stored in it. And remember, now this is also an object. So put that note back in your mind as well. So console.log first name doesn't match. This variable is totally different. Okay, the syntax of a program is correct. But now you don't, let me go over something real quick. This right here, yeah, you don't have to really worry about that information. This is what you're looking for right here. This is the information you're looking for. First name is not defined. I just want to make sure I point that out. The syntax of our program is correct, but when the program executes, an error occurs at line 2. We attempt to print the value of the variable first name, but such a variable does not exist. Like I explained, it has to, whatever you're looking for, it has to already be declared and defined, really declared. As long as it's declared, you won't get the error. So let's do that, because I need to make sure you understand what I mean. This is why it's so important to play around with the code. So if I go down here and then I go ahead and paste this in, I hope this is helping y'all. So I'll go ahead and I run it. First name is not defined. Well, let me do this. So I just want to declare it. And now I want to console.log first name. There you go. It didn't give me an error because it's now been declared. I didn't have to initialize it. It's now being declared. That's what that means. I just wanted you to see that. Now let's get down to our logic error. This is the one that is going to cause you the biggest problem. This is why it's important. As developers, we already know what the result is before we write the code. So when we don't get what we expected to get, the results, that's when we know that it's a logic error. It's logical. There's no other error it's giving me. The program is running, but the result is not what we intended. So here we go. The third type of error is the logic error. If there's a logic error in your program, it will run successfully and not generate an error message. However, the program will not work as intended. The characteristic of a logic error is that the program you wrote is not the program you wanted. For example, say you want a program to calculate your daily earnings based on the weekly salary. You might try the following. Now this looks right? Because weekly pay is $600, or say 600. And then we create the daily earnings. And we do the weekly pay divided by 7. Why? Because there's 7 days a week. And then we console.log, but that's not what you expected to see. You wouldn't expected the output to be 85.71. You expected it to be a little bit different, a little bit more. Because at $600, at 7 now, I'm expecting that to be over $100, at least over $100. And the logic is not correct, but the syntax is. The runtime, everything, the variable is correct. Everything is correct, but the logic isn't. It says the result surprises you because you thought you were making at least $100 per day. You work Monday through Friday. According to this program, though, you're making about $85 per day. The error is a logic one because you divided your weekly pay by 7. It would have been more accurate to divide your weekly pay by 5, since that is how many days of the week you come to work. Identifying logic errors can be tricky because unlike syntax and runtime problems, there are no error messages to help us identify the issue. We must examine the output of the program and work backwards to figure out what it is doing wrong. So check your understanding. So now we made it to the end of this section. I know this video was a little long, but I needed to give you a couple of examples to kind of help you understand what was in this section. Now, remember, the more you do, the more you improve. See you in the next section.